From the traumatic decision of a police officer to a group of cultists frightening a police officer, police are a group of officials that symbolize the civil power of government, but they also experience certain unsettling incidents. It's been said that when you put on the uniform and badge every day as a police officer, you never truly know what to expect. While some days are unremarkable, others push you to the edge in ways you never thought were possible. What are you waiting for? Let's dive into the thrilling stories that are more disturbing, interesting, and frightening at the same time. This is the true disturbing police horror stories. Story 1: The Naive Teenage Shooter. I've had my fair share of challenging days at work, but one in particular sticks out as the most horrific of my career. I'll never forget what happened that day and how it affected me more as a person than an officer. It was one of those chilly mornings when you went outside and felt the cool air knit at your face. With the sound of early traffic and the far-off buzz of people starting their everyday lives, the city was just waking up. Like we had for so many years, my shift began with Jake and me sipping hot cups of coffee. Since we have been co-workers for almost 10 years, our friendship has brightened even the dullest of days. We were aware of each other's advantages and disadvantages and knew we could always rely on one another. The first segment of our shift played out just like countless more. In addition to a minor automobile collision at a major intersection with an irate driver, we responded to the routine call involving Petroleum City and exchanged information while recording their statements. It was a shoplifting incident at a nearby convenience store where the culprit was shamefully attempting to conceal the stolen merchandise. We also had a few noise complaints, which pointed us in the direction of two argumentative neighbors at an out-of-control college party. It would fill us up as the morning wore on into the afternoon, growling and alerting us when it was time for lunch. We frequently take advantage of this opportunity to unwind by telling jokes and exchanging anecdotes to lift one another's moods. We had no idea that the call that would interrupt our lunch. We learned that there had been a high school shooting from the dispatcher. Our imaginations were racing with ideas of what we may find as we hurried to the scene with our adrenaline pumping. Though nothing can fully prepare you for the reality of facing such a nightmare, we had prepared to be active shooters. There was an unbelievable amount of chaos when we got to the school. Pupils were leaving the building in droves, many of them drenched and bloody. The dread in the teachers' eyes was evident despite their best efforts to keep everything in order. With a knowing look, Jake and I agreed that we had to move fast to save the lives of the faculty and staff inside the school. With our pulse racing and our pistols drawn, we walked into the building. Aside from the distant sound of gunfire and screams, the hallways were unnaturally quiet. With caution, we made our way down the hallway, inspecting each classroom for the gunmen. With terrified expressions on their faces, we discovered instructors and pupils concealed behind closed doors, beneath desks, and in closets. We were searching when we rounded a corner and discovered a bloody trail leading to the school's gym. But when we walked inside the room, we were confronted with a horrifying scene. Several pupils were lying on the ground, their lifeless gaze fixed on the ceiling. It was evident that we had located the core of the disaster as the air was heavy with the scent of gunpowder and terror. After searching the gym for some time, we eventually found the shooter. He was clearly in a panic and was only a teenager, not much older than the youngsters he had targeted. We tried to calm him down or defuse the threat after having to make a snap decision. In the meantime, using deadly force would be a difficult decision, knowing that additional lives were on the line. After the shooting, everything was a whirl of crying people, sirens, and the weight of an almost unbearable tragedy. Subsequently, we discovered that the gunman was a disturbed student who reacted violently out of loneliness and rage. The extent of what we had gone through started to dawn on us when we had our debriefing with other officers. We had to make decisions that would follow us for the rest of our lives after facing the unthinkable. Over the next few days, weeks, and months, I found it difficult to process what had transpired. I was revisiting the day's events in my head, wondering if I had made the correct decisions. I also couldn't shake the helplessness and guilt that had settled in my chest, and I knew I had to find a way to get well. Before we continue with the second story, subscribe to Top Scaries, where we dig deep into scary, horror, and disturbing stories. You can also help by liking, sharing, and commenting on this video. Let us know what you think about them. Story 2, The Gang Attack. I recently joined the highway patrol at the age of 22. Normally, I would patrol less traveled highways. However, as I had only recently been employed, I didn't have much experience. To be honest, the first few weeks were a little stressful, especially since our patrol officers were confined to one police car for the most part. But by now, after working there for about 3 months, I was much more accustomed to the work. I nearly always put in 9 hours, working from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. I found it annoying at first, but the more I did it, the more I understood why. As usual, I was traveling down the highways at around 2 in the morning on a Thursday, and to be honest, it was rather lifeless. I maintained a constant speed of 65 miles per hour. The roads were nearly entirely encircled by woodland. Therefore, I would constantly attempt to go more slowly in case a deer suddenly appeared in front of me. After 10 minutes or so of driving, I hadn't even seen another car. Even at this time of night, I would normally have at least one car pass every 30 seconds or so. About a quarter of a mile ahead of me, as I was coming around another bend, I saw a car with its hazard lights on. It was a dark-colored car of some kind that was angled such that only a portion of it was on the shoulder, and the remainder of it was racing onto the road. I could not ignore it when I drew closer and saw that the driver's side door was flung open, essentially spanning the entire lane. After approaching the car from behind, I radioed that I had discovered a car with its hazards activated and exited. I approached the car while holding my torch. The car's interior light was on, but no one was inside. The oddity of the whole situation struck me right away because the car's key were inside the ignition and engine was still running, yet no one was inside. I looked everywhere with my torch blazing, but all I saw were trees. So I quickly shouted, "Hi there, is anyone present?" There was no answer for approximately a minute. Just as I was ready to radiograph the situation, I noticed something. When I turned to look near the tree line, I saw a man in a mask staring at me. It wasn't a ski mask, but a COVID face mask, or anything typical. It was one of those masks you see in the Purge films. In response, I lifted my torch right away. With my other hand, I was gripping my revolver, which was in my belt. But when I looked, I saw that there were 3 or 4 more males there, staring at me. They were all carrying firearms and donning masks. While some were armed only with baseball bats, others carried weapons, one of which was a fully functional pump-action shotgun. I now removed my gun from my belt and pointed it in their direction, telling them all to put down their weapons. But naturally, not a single one did. I was still pointing my rifle at them as I carefully made my way back towards my car. To be honest, I felt very sick at that moment. My heart was pounding out of my chest from fear. At that moment, I could hear rustling coming from behind me in the forest line. I had had enough by then and had betrayed every virtue of being a police officer. I ran back to my cruiser and made plans to leave right away. As I went, I counted at least 7 mask-wearing individuals on either side of the road, all of whom were near the tree line. I called for quick assistance a short while later, but I knew it would take some time for help to come because I was rather far away. After some time, a few cruisers finally turned up, and I used the opportunity to show them the scene. However, when we got there, the car was gone, and the only indication of human activity was the tire marks they left behind on the side of the road. To the best of my knowledge, nothing further came to pass. I still think about the incident and believe that those people would have been apprehended if I had reacted differently. However, I fled like a coward, and I will always have to live with it. I'm still not sure if those guys were part of a cult, gang, or something else, but I'm the only reason they're still around. Most of these police officers go through disturbing experiences that they cannot share with anyone. But have you had any terrible experiences with an officer? Share your story in the comment section below. How well do you love birthday parties? Do you know there are still some dark secrets about birthday celebrations? Check out our previous video on your screen. disturbing true birthday horror stories.